as we thought about sort of this evening and this conference, we knew what kind of person we wanted to have speak. We wanted someone who exemplifies two qualities that are so often seen to be in tension in philanthropy: passionate personal commitment to a cause and a real deep belief in the power of research and data. I don't get why these two things are seen to be in tension. Never have. Maybe I'm missing something, but I don't think they are. And no one we could think of better embodies those two qualities in one person than Michael J. Fox. So I'm not really going to introduce him to you because I know that many of you, like me, have watched him over the years, appreciating his acting ability, appreciating his humor, and also appreciating that he seemed to be someone of great decency and humanity. And then we saw how true that is. He's someone who, in the face of his diagnosis with Parkinson's, always sees the reasons for optimism. Someone who, in the prologue to his book, Always Looking Up, writes, "For everything this disease has taken, something with greater value has been given." Someone who has dedicated his life to supporting medical research that has the potential to help millions of people, becoming an advocate and voice for the community of people living with Parkinson's. Someone who could have made many other choices about how to devote his time and his energies and his resources. Someone who's made us laugh and cry and imagine what is possible if you dream big, as he always has. Made us see that both through his acting and through his philanthropy. We're incredibly fortunate tonight that Michael J. Fox is here and that he will also be joined by a special guest who isn't on your program, and that's his co-founder, Debi Brooks. Debi played an instrumental role in the establishment of the foundation after a very successful career at Goldman Sachs. In Always Looking Up, Michael J. Fox describes hiring Debi as someone, he writes, whose greatest asset is her mind, with her heart a close second, and someone for whom optimism and pragmatism are not oil and water. I'm so pleased and honored to introduce Michael J. Fox and Debi Brooks of the Michael J. Fox Foundation, who will now sit down for an after-dinner conversation with the fabulous Stephen Heinz, CEP's board chair and Rockefeller Brothers Fund president. Please help me welcome Michael J. Fox and Debi Brooks.
Well, Michael and Debi, welcome. It's so terrific to have you both with us this evening. I know during the course of the day there was a lot of buzz around the conference. People were looking forward to this so much, so thank you. I have to start by plugging this book. He would do it otherwise, but I just feel that I ought to spare him that effort tonight, because this is a terrific book. It is a book that is at the same time at once instructive, it is inspiring, it is funny, and very, very compelling. It is really good reading. I really recommend it, and thank you for doing it. So, I want to start with some of the stories that you tell in the book about how you moved from the diagnosis in 1991 to continuing to work for the rest of that decade, but in the year 2000, making what had to be, as you describe, a really profoundly difficult decision to leave acting, and then to start the Michael J. Fox Foundation, dedicated to finding a cure for the disease that you now live with every day. And there's a huge transition involved there, obviously, at a personal level, at a professional level. You obviously were very used to being a public face of a certain kind as an artist and as an actor. And then you became a public face as a foundation leader and as an advocate for a cause. And I'd like to ask you to tell us a little bit about that journey for you personally. What was it like to make that transition in roles in your life?
experience goes back to 2000 when I first noticed symptoms, and then 2001 when I was diagnosed, and I was 29. Had a young son, and I didn't know what to make of it. It was just such a strange diagnosis, Parkinson's. And my doctor said to me, he said, "Well, you have 10 good years of work left." And I just, it became very. My wife knew about it, Tracy knew about it, and a few good friends, close friends knew about it. But I kept it very secret, very to myself. And I have the pills like loose in my pocket, and I'd it wasn't really getting the best information from my doctors because I kind of resented them for having told me this news in the first place.
Yeah.
It's like a rock. You kick a rock over, there's bugs in it, and they'll bite you. So don't kick the rock. But so it took me a long time, and I had some issues with alcohol around it, trying to deal with it that way, and then that didn't work for me. So I quit that, and the other thing I did was because of this prognosis that I had 10 good years of work left in me, and they didn't seem to be all that good at the time as they were unfolding. I thought I better work a lot, and so I had a young family, and then soon had twin daughters that came along to join my son, and I was working all the time, and I was in New Zealand one time doing a film, and it just struck me that I wanted to be back home in New York.
Yeah.
And so I came back, and I decided to go back into television and to do a show in New York where my family was, and I could spend time with them. And I knew a 7 years run of a show would be about how long I had left according to this thing, this proclamation by the doctor. And as I started to do that, by the time I started to do the show, I'd accepted it, and I'd realized that acceptance isn't resignation. That by accepting it and acknowledging the truth of it, and that it would impact my family, but I could share with them and trust them to go through the experience with me. It just all seemed lighter, and the only thing that was left was that I hadn't told people, the audience, because I thought, I was doing a comedy at the time, and I thought, can they laugh at me if they know I'm sick, or if they think I'm sick, and it was this whole big thing. And then eventually I got so hard to hide the symptoms I couldn't. I had a surgery, and that was only partly helpful, and so I decided that I needed to tell people. So I told People Magazine and Barbara Walters, so everybody knew.
That's an efficient way to get the word out. Yeah.
And the amazing thing that happened was, as soon as I did it, and this was just this was 1998, so it was just like, it never occurred to me that I did this article that People Magazine's website would scoop themselves, like put it out. I mean, I wasn't kid savvy enough to get that there's this whole online thing happening. And so I spent Thanksgiving of 1998 kind of hunkered down in our family's country place in Connecticut, and knowing that every time I turned on the TV, it was a news story. I couldn't believe the amount of attention it was getting, and it really flipped me out. I couldn't put the genie back in the bottle. I mean, that was it. I disclosed this, and this was my new reality going forward, and I didn't know what it would be. And it was all about me, and then a really cool thing happened as I started to get brave enough to turn back on the TV and read newspapers again. The story had changed. They were still talking about it, but they were talking about Parkinson's. And they were talking about what is Parkinson's and how can a 29-year-old have Parkinson's, and they started doing profiles on people with Parkinson's and their loved ones and their experience. And I thought, wow. My first thought was, I'm part of a community. Mm-hmm. All these years I've been doing this and living this thing, and never once grasping that others were having the same experiences I was having, mm-hmm. and that maybe we could learn something from each other. So I started lurking on. Now I got this internet thing down. I started lurking in chat rooms, PD chat rooms, and hearing people talk about their medications. And we all have different medications that work for us differently. Everyone gets their own disease, And so people swapping notes, and every once in a while they drop in a thing about Michael Fox. And then, you know, one lady said she went to the store where the guy always thought she was drunk. And finally she said, no, I'm not drunk, I have Parkinson's. And he said, oh, like Michael Fox.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff just touched me. And so eventually, I'm giving you the long story because
It's all right.
it's a loaded question.
It's a great story.
So then what happened was I kind of went back about doing the show, and people still laughed, and it was good, and it was just getting harder to do, but I continued doing it, and at that time now Parkinson's foundations were coming to me, and talking to me about what they were doing, and I knew I didn't want to. They were all terrific. I knew I didn't want to be a mascot. I didn't want to be a face for a flag. I mean, there's no. I realized that there was a certain coin in my celebrity, but I didn't want to give someone else the purse. And I thought if I am going to do something, then it really has to be the shot. I got one shot. I got one shot to get this right.
So I think you've just answered my second question, which is why create your own foundation when there were others, and you could have helped raise money for others. But I want to, in probing this a little bit with you, read a passage from Always Looking Up about your assessment of what the philanthropic world was like with regard to research on Parkinson's at the time you were thinking about this. And you write here, I was not just interested in write a check and hope for the best version of philanthropy as usual. That's a powerful phrase, you know, the write a check and hope for the best version of philanthropy as usual. But an investment in a new kind of undertaking, the promise of quick action, accountability, innovation, and a positive outcome for which they could all claim a share of responsibility.
Yeah. I remember telling guys, get some champagne on you. Come in for the big win.
Look for the big win. Go for the big win.
Yeah.
And do it in a really focused and measurable way.
One of the reasons to answer your question about why, Debbie's going to jump in here soon.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why I started a new foundation was there were other organizations that were terrific. There were some that were patient service oriented, and some that were politically active and dealt with those issues and government funding and whatnot. And I just saw an opportunity for. I'm hearing these rumblings from the scientific community about what was possible in 4, 5, 10 years. And I thought, they're saying that, but then nobody says, okay, well, who is that guy? Who's the guy who knows that? Where does he work? What is he doing? What does he need? What does he need to do it more and better and sooner?
Faster, right.
And faster. And not desperation, but urgency. And so that I decided that would be the hallmark of what we did. Mm-hmm. It would be that kind of informed urgency, and a thing that we always say is it's become like a joke at our board meetings and stuff. But it's POM, purity of motive. just whenever you get bogged down in any kind of political thing or whatever, it's just purity of motive. We're here for one thing.
Right.
We're in business to go out of business.
Right.
I mean, you guys see, it's terrific celebrating the 10th anniversary, and we wish this organization goes on for many more. We want to be out of business.
Right.
We don't. It's our 10th anniversary. We're not celebrating it. But I should.
I was going to ask Debbie if I can. So you came in, and I love the story about the interview and how you were hired. And Phil already quoted from that wonderful passage about the combination of head and heart, which I think really is at the heart of good philanthropy. But you had a business background, a finance background. So when you were a co-founder of this foundation, did you look at other foundations to see which ones were doing well and which models worked, or did you just kind of decide to create it of whole cloth in a vision that the two of you shared? How did that happen?
I'd like to think that we were strategic and that on day one we kind of mapped out all these high-profile, kind of high-impact groups and, systematically went around to check them out. But we just weren't informed enough, honestly, on day one. We had kind of got our heads together on some core things. We were interested in urgency. We were focused on relevance. What can we do that can be relevant for patients and in particular to advance new treatments? And then we cared about big picture things like transparency, accountability. And so we had these concepts in mind, but we didn't really know that the enterprise in which we were about to get involved, this medical research enterprise, we didn't know it was broken. We didn't know that some models were good and some models were bad.
Yeah.
We just put our head down and started to try to do the work. And what we found is that, in fact, the medical research enterprise is remarkably broken.
Dysfunctional.
If you are a patient waiting at the other end of a 25-year, billion-dollar-plus effort, we spend $110 billion a year in this country on medical research. I think we have shockingly little to show for that. And so, we weren't, but having said that, many people made it easy for us by coming forward. And I think this is very much a tribute to kind of Michael and people wanting to help and folks of all ilks. And so we really did get a chance early on to connect with some people that it was easy to admire who had walked in the steps before us. But some of them were in the medical research area, but many weren't. I mean, one organization I think that we both were influenced by right out of the gates was the Robin Hood Foundation, which is New York City based, which is where our organization is. Many of our board members, kind of had familiarity with that group. And so, we picked up bits and pieces, but we were really focused on peeling the onion and trying to understand what our problem was and what we could be doing to move the dial.
Yeah. So in your 10 years so far, you've become the largest foundation funder of Parkinson's research. But as you were hinting, Debbie, you've also become a transformative agent in terms of how people think about health research philanthropy. And what would you, if you were to point to a couple of things that have been key to your success, that's a remarkable set of accomplishments. You haven't got the entire goal done yet. Some work yet to do, but you've accomplished a lot in those two things themselves. What were the keys to getting you to that point in only 10 years' time?
Well, I'll let Debbie elaborate on it, but I think it's meeting situations where they were, meeting, not seeking what we wanted to find, but what there was to find, and I think convening, getting people together that hadn't been together before. I mean, you have all these disparate groups that ostensibly are in it for the same objective, but you'd never know it.
So the money is important, but it's not the whole story, is it?
More money makes a difference, but we are convinced, especially in medical research, again, if you look at the landscape of folks who are funding Parkinson's research, the US government is much bigger than we are, pharmaceutical industry much bigger than we are, so in a relative sense, we're the smallest. And so we get a sense that more money could be useful, but we know that our dollars are having a remarkably higher impact on a per dollar basis because of how we spend it. And so I'd say in thinking about some of the key things that have equipped us to hopefully have impact, one is that we didn't really outsource decision making when it came to making grants. And I think particularly for public charities who are focused in a disease space, many of them prioritize patient services, so they don't allocate a large amount of their budget to research, but to the extent they do, they tend to call the experts, hand them a pile of money and say, you just tell us where to send the checks, and then they send the checks out. And we found quickly, and perhaps because we were just naive enough to not know any better, that we felt more comfortable really thinking about how to use capital and then educating ourselves on in a way to allocate capital. And so we have an unusual approach, having PhDs on staff. We run a portfolio of investments as if we're not a venture capital fund, but we look more like an incubator fund for Parkinson's drug development than we look like a typical disease nonprofit.
So I think part of that, from what I've been able to learn by reading and studying your work, is that you really stress accountability and have from the very beginning. You feel a deep sense of accountability to your community.
Well, I feel I've been, people say I represent a community, or they didn't vote for me. They didn't have any
They
choice.
would overwhelmingly, though.
They didn't have any choice in the matter. I just was thrust upon them, and so given that attention, I decided to use it to the best service that I thought I could. But yeah, I mean, people, not only people with Parkinson's, obviously, but their families and people who, if you send $10 to the Michael Fox Foundation, on some level, you got to know that I appreciate that, and we're going to use it towards something.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's just it's a personal thing in a way between me and the other members of my community, that I want them, and sometimes, I mean, they get mad at me because because sometimes I'm not focused on patient services, or I'm not, and I knew that early on. I knew that I had to. One of the reasons we focused on research was it was a huge task, the essential task. But you could really focus on it. And I mean, if we started going all these other directions, no one would be served.
Yeah. So this notion of accountability to your community, to your donors, and then you have a kind of a reciprocal request or expectation that in fact your researchers are going to be accountable to you, because you have invested in them both financially and with trust. And how do you measure that? How do you measure that progress that they're making? What are the wayposts that you use to see that you're making forward progress?
Well, it's a funny concept of that accountability. I mean, I came from a financial background and used to thinking about measurement and impact. And I mean, we are accountable to those donors. We don't have an endowment. We start from scratch every year. So we really are making our case to our funders year in and year out. And when you have to work that hard to raise the money, believe me, you're very conscientious about how you spend it. And what we found, to me it was shocking, is that a good portion of our dollars go to academic researchers. Not all. We fund biotech companies and even large pharma, believe it or not. But particularly the academics, they were accustomed to NIH writing a check, and that was it. And they could work off that money for 5 years, and even the next time they come back to re-up their NIH grants, they aren't necessarily asked, and by the way, how'd that last one go? And so this I found shocking, but I didn't know any better. And so when we were designing our programs and even our very first initiative, we set about, we literally did it from scratch, not knowing that there was kind of the way it was always done. We just, blindly put things together. And oddly enough, those core elements are still in all of our grant contracting. And one of the first things we did was, we make shorter grants than the government typically does. We make generally 1 and 2 year grants. But those 2 year grants, we're looking for a progress update, some kind of interim feedback. And so, again, naively, I said, well, how about if we get everybody at the midway point to come and tell us about their work? And the scientific advisor said, oh, well, they'll send a postdoc. They're so busy. And I said, well, we're kind of busy too, but this is important. and we might benefit from this if we all get in the room. And you kind of got this pushback of what you can't do or how it's not typically done. But we just kind of kept going, and I think that's where, the currency of Michael extends its magic very far, in my view. I mean, on the Parkinson's patient community for sure, a donor community and media, but the scientists were equally excited and motivated, and it gave me just enough permission to try things a little differently. And so we could really put all sorts of requirements and try some things, and found that many of them stuck. And so this concept initially of inviting scientists to come for an in-person presentation of their work in progress in front of their competitors, they tolerated it.
Up.
But
yeah.
And at first they interpreted this as punitive and kind of overreaching and kind of big brother. But what we found, and was kind of the win-win, because it wasn't meant to be punitive, it was just meant to provide focus. But what we found was in this setting where the groups would come together, whether it was 10 scientists or 20 scientists working on related challenges, they would share their work in progress with each other, and this was all unpublished work. And there was so much cross-fertilization and problem-solving in the moment that the assessment meetings end up being some of the best work that we could spawn. partnerships, collaborations. I'm sending you my, antibodies. You help me with this thing over here, and then it became where you wouldn't miss that assessment meeting because we would then turn around and say, well, given what we've heard, what are some of the key challenges we need to be thinking about? And if you weren't at that assessment meeting and in that portfolio, you missed the chance to influence us. And so, oddly enough, even some of the things that we introduced that might be viewed as kind of part of our accountability are really also just strategies that serve our joint work, getting to our mission.
And another thing that happened too, just a personal note, when I'd go by the foundation and there'd be these large groups of scientists in a conference room and busy swapping stories and swapping information, and I would come in and to say thank you to them, and it was cool their response to me, not as Michael Fox, not as the nominal figure in the foundation, but as a Parkinson's patient, that I would be, I'd be very symptomatic in front of them, whatever, and I could see them making the connection between what they're doing and this person, a shaky person at the front of the table.
Right.
That it was about to fix the shaky person, and that's why my name is on it, because I'm not because I'm Michael Fox, but because I'm a Parkinson's patient, and it's about, at the end of the day, it's about and for by Parkinson's patients.
But Michael, then I want to ask you what I know is a very personal question. You write so heartbreakingly in the book about what it's like to live with the afflictions of Parkinson's disease, the struggle just to get your feet to do things in parallel occasionally, the effort it takes you to brush your teeth in the morning. So you're coping with all of that, which would break any normal human being. And yet you're also responsible for this important foundation, and you feel and obviously act on a sense of deep responsibility to the wider Parkinson's community. How do you cope with it all?
It's the new normal.
It's the new normal.
It's what it is. It's I think it's like I always say. I remember saying early on when I wrote my first book, and I said that Parkinson's in a way was a gift to me, and a lot of people with Parkinson's justifiably were pissed off about that.
They didn't think it was such a gift.
It was such a gift, and I said, okay, it's a gift that keeps on taking. but it has been a gift to me, and I'm in a different situation than other folks. I don't have to worry about insurance. I don't have to worry about pre-existing conditions. I don't have to worry about bosses not understanding it or being ostracized or thought to be, any of those issues. I don't, and so I'm freed up to do this work. And in terms of the other stuff, foundation, I only had to be smart enough to find people that were smarter than me and keep them close.
That's always the key.
And my family, I have a wonderful wife and 4 great kids, and they keep me motivated and happy every day. So it's just, I find that whatever I lose, I think I've said this, but whatever I lose, I gain something better. That loss is not a vacuum. Stuff comes in, and if I can just accept it. There's an expression that I love that my happiness grows in direct proportion to my acceptance and inverse proportion to my expectations. And that's really been the rule for me.
Oh, it's a remarkable form of leadership. Another way you exercise leadership is that you quickly realized that it was not only about trying to raise money and get money to the right researchers who could accelerate this process of finding a cure, but it was also about changing policy. And so you got deeply involved, personally and institutionally, in policy advocacy and politics, for that matter.
Well, that was a really interesting thing because I couldn't, strictly speaking, the foundation couldn't be involved in it, in whatever I did.
Right, of course. None of us can.
Right. But I could.
And sometimes we're envious.
and so I in fact I wrote letters to a lot of our supporters and board members and said, I'm going to be doing this thing. I'm going to be speaking out about this issue, and please forgive me and excuse me, and know that this has nothing to do with the foundation or its policies or its mission, and it's just my thing I want to do. And one of our biggest donors is a avid Republican, wrote me a letter and said, something to the effect of, it's terrible what you're doing. It's blah, blah, blah. And at the end he said, here's another check. and so that was an interesting experience because it was just, I just thought it was a simple, everyone's entitled to their own opinion. I thought that the destruction of these embryonic stem cells that were routinely discarded after in vitro fertilization, if you didn't have a problem with in vitro fertilization, then how could you have a problem with this carrying out, using this material that was going to be destroyed? It was literally going to be washed down the drain.
Yeah.
And the potential to save people alive today. We don't know. We didn't know, and we don't know now. And in fact,
Right.
Stem cells has been frustrating in a lot of ways. But to me, in my own mind, to limit, to realize, to do due diligence about the moral and ethical concerns, and
Right.
pretty firm that no one was going to be harmed. That science should be able to go on. It's our very nature is that to just say we're not going to go down that road because by polling a substantially smaller portion of the population disagreed with it. I just thought it didn't make sense. So I went on, and then it became pro wrestling because Rush Limbaugh got involved. But that was great too because that was a great gift. Yeah, it just heightened it, and so he got to make fun of me, and I get to just talk about the issue.
So. So dividing out these two dimensions of the policy arena, one, politics itself, which you can engage in as a private citizen and leader, and then the policy advocacy that the foundation engages in and supports. There are a lot of funders here who are not working in health research, but they are working in a lot of areas of policy advocacy, whether it's environmental or education policy, or you can name many other fields. So what have you all found is the most effective way to advance the cause through policy advocacy?
I'm not sure that we would declare ourselves effective per se, but I think our strategy has been to lead by example. So we don't go to Washington and wring our hands and plead a case. We go to Washington and talk about the science and what we believe to be key next steps and unmet needs and strategies that we're undertaking because we have more degrees of freedom in many ways and how we see those working. And we, quickly, myself and other colleagues have served on council at NIH, and we become advisors quickly because we don't just kind of cross our fingers and hope for the best. We come with data. And while we could probably spend all of our budget trying to influence policy, the probability that we'd have success might be still quite low. And so our strategy has been to spend our dollars on research in ways we know can give us the best shot for moving the dial, and at the same time try to bring the relevant folks in government alongside. And what we find is sometimes we hope that by leading this way they'll join, but more often than not, they can't move as quickly or with a sense of urgency or with specificity. So you can convince the government that it's important to be thinking about translational research, but they may never allocate specific strategic funds to Parkinson's. And so we just can't wait, and we keep our eye on our mission and execute and hope that we can at least share our experiences and our ideas and that some of them get traction. And I can say in a 10-year period, we see more evidence at the National Institutes of Health on focus for translational research, something we value. And that is a little bit of a shift, but if we had waited 10 years for that to be coming, a lot of good science would not be funded at this point. So that's our best approach.
So unfortunately, this conversation has just flown by and we're pretty much out of time, but I have to ask the kind of final question for tonight, which is, having dedicated your lives to this, what's your assessment of where we are? Will we see a cure for Parkinson's in the next decade?
I certainly hope so. And by cure, I mean, if we can come up with a therapy that halts progression and eliminates symptoms, I'll take it.
Yeah.
We still don't know the cause, so until we get that piece, it's impossible, really, strictly speaking, to find the cure. But I think that I just lost my train of thought for a second. I'm sorry.
What
I
do you
mean, in
think?
some ways, I think what we, whether it, I think we feel confident that the work we're doing is going to accelerate the process.
Yeah.
So at some level, trying to figure out what it takes to get to a cure, if we had to get that roadmap before we could clear the road and get there, we just don't, we're not that patient. So we are putting one foot in front of the other, and we're just staying our course. And as our funding has expanded, we see more traction in what we're doing, and we feel confident that if that transformative new treatment was going to happen in 7, it doesn't matter to us, because we're just going to keep our head down and keep going.
I have to say, not only is Debbie helping me fix my substantia nigra, she often acts as my frontal lobe. What I was getting at was just that it's just we can't know the rate of acceleration of our ability to compute, our ability to explore genetics and how fast that stuff is going to turn. There may be tipping points.
Exactly.
We may have even passed some tipping points that we'll look back on and say we could have made the turn there. You just go into it and just know that purity of motive, throw everything you got at it, learn from your mistakes. Science is about mistakes. I mean, the idea is you take 20 steps backwards and they take a giant leap forward. And so we just want to, we'll stumble back to that leaping point. We have to, but.
Well, it's a remarkable story of what you've done and what you're doing, and we can be certain that this process is moving much faster and with much greater effect because of the great work that the two of you are doing. And thank you very much for your leadership. Thanks, Michael J. Fox and Debi Brooks, for being with us. Thank you so much. It was great. It was really terrific. You're amazing. Totally amazing. Thanks, Debbie. Thanks.